I was already 2 weeks behind on rent when I finally worked up the nerve to knock on his door. Jake, my landlord, lived in the unit above mine. We'd spoken maybe 4 times in the 6 months since I'd moved in, and every time, I'd felt like I was interrupting something. He was older, maybe early 40s, with a quiet, watchful way about him. Always dressed in black, always polite but distant. I never figured out if he was shy, annoyed by my presence, or just reserved. That afternoon, I was desperate. I'd just lost my third job in as many months, laid off from a retail gig I hated anyway, and I had about $37 in my checking account. He opened the door wearing a dark hoodie and joggers, barefoot, like I'd caught him in the middle of doing absolutely nothing. Hey, I rubbed the back of my neck. Can we talk for a sec? About the rent. Jake didn't blink. He stepped aside without a word, gesturing me in like this was exactly the conversation he'd been expecting. His apartment was the mirror image of mine, but bigger. Cleaner. Warmer, somehow, like he actually lived in it. It smelled faintly of coffee and cedar, and there was a record playing low in the background. Old jazz, I think. I'm guessing it's not ready yet, he said flatly, motioning toward the couch. Not exactly, I said. I'm not trying to duck out on it. It's just been a rough few months. He nodded once, arms crossed, leaning against the kitchen island. You're not the only one. That surprised me. Jake never said anything about himself. He was the type of guy who could go through an entire conversation, revealing absolutely nothing. I could make a partial payment next week, I offered, hating how rehearsed it sounded, and then maybe the rest by the 15th, if that's okay. He didn't respond right away, just stared at me like he was figuring out a math problem. Then he finally spoke. What do you do? Like, for work? I blinked. I was working at Bailey's Market, but they cut back on staff. I've been picking up freelance stuff when I can, mostly photography, editing. He raised an eyebrow. You're a photographer? I shrugged, trying to be. Another pause. Then, I have an idea. That's when he walked over to the table, grabbed a notepad, and started sketching something out. He explained that he was rehabbing a second property just across town, a small duplex he wanted to convert into an artist co-op or something like that. It still needed branding, photos, a website, a vibe. I suck at this kind of thing, he said, but it sounds like it's your wheelhouse. I stared at him. You want me to trade rent for creative work? He nodded. You help me get it ready. In exchange, I knock off what you owe. And I'll cover January too, if you're up for it. I had 1,000 questions, but none of them mattered. I just nodded. Yeah, I'm up for it. He extended his hand across the table. Firm shake, warm skin. 1 month, no slacking, he said. Deal. And that was how it started. Not with some awkward confession or weird proposition, but with a handshake. Just business. Or that's what I told myself. It didn't take long for the business part of our deal to start feeling something else. The next morning, Jake buzzed my phone just after 9 a.m. I was still half asleep and debating whether I could stretch the last of my milk into another cup of coffee. He texted, "Up for a walkthrough? Bring your camera." I threw on jeans, a hoodie, grabbed my gear, and walked the 5 blocks to the duplex. It was a squat little building, plain and boxy, the kind of place you'd barely glance at walking by. But Jake saw something in it. He had stripped it down to the bones. White walls, exposed brick, light pouring in from the tall windows. Eventually, I want to rent to artists, musicians, people trying to get their footing, he said as we stood in one of the empty units. Low rent, flexible terms, but it has to look like somewhere people want to be, you know. I nodded, clicking through shots. You have a name for it? He glanced around like he was seeing it for the first time. Not yet. Let me play with some concepts, I said, crouching down to get a better angle of the light spilling across the wooden floors. The bones are good. It just needs character. He smirked. That's your job now. Over the next few days, we fell into a strange rhythm. He'd send a text every morning. Just a time and place. And I'd show up with my camera and laptop. We'd grab coffee, sometimes lunch. I'd shoot, edit, sketch ideas. He'd pace, grumble, make small tweaks to his renovation list. At first, we barely talked outside of the project. Jake kept things strictly professional. Emails, Dropbox folders, shared Google Docs. But somewhere around day 5, something shifted. It was late, around 10 p.m. I was in my apartment exporting photos when I got another text from him. "Hungry?" I frowned. Before I could answer, another message popped up. "I made too much. Come up if you want." I almost said no. I told myself I was too tired, still behind on freelance deadlines, and didn't want to blur the lines of whatever this weird arrangement was. But I went anyway. Jake opened the door barefoot again, same black hoodie, sleeves pushed up. The apartment smelled incredible. Garlic, rosemary, something tomatoey. He led me to the kitchen without a word and set a steaming bowl of pasta in front of me. "I cook when I can't sleep," he said, almost offensively. "Don't read into it." "Wouldn't dream of it," I said, grinning. "What is this?" "Beef ragu. My mom's recipe. She'd kill me for serving it without wine, but all I've got is sparkling water." We ate at the counter, plates between us, soft music playing again. Miles Davis, I think. There was something easy about it, even though we barely knew each other. Comfortable silence. The kind that didn't demand conversation but still felt full. After dinner, he leaned against the sink, arms crossed. "You've got an eye," he said. "For details." "Thanks," I hesitated, then added, "So do you. For spaces, not just the walls, the way people live in them." He glanced at me, the corner of his mouth twitching, like he wasn't used to compliments. "I grew up in a house where everything was functional. No art, no warmth, just survival." I didn't say anything, I just watched him. He cleared his throat. "That's why I like rehabbing places, making them feel like something more than just 4 walls." There was a silence after that. Not awkward, just weighty, like we'd stepped over some kind of invisible line. I left not long after, still tasting rosemary on my tongue. From then on, things changed. We started staying later at the duplex, sometimes until midnight. He let me blast music while I edited, started opening up more about the project, and then about other things. His ex who broke up with him 2 years ago. His dad, who he hadn't spoken to in a decade. His first real apartment, a roach-infested walk-up with a toilet that screamed when you flushed it. I told him about my photography teacher in high school who changed everything for me. About how I used to sneak into empty parking garages just to shoot light and shadows. About my ex who thought art wasn't a real career, and how it took me way too long to leave. He never judged, just listened, asked questions, stayed quiet when I needed him to. One night, we were sitting on the dusty hardwood floor of the finished unit, laptops out, debating fonts. He leaned over to look at something on my screen, and for a second, we were too close. His shoulder touched mine, and neither of us moved away. His voice was lower than usual. "That one's good. Clean. Honest." I looked up. He was already watching me, and for a moment, I wondered if something was going to happen. If he was going to kiss me, if I wanted him to. But then his phone buzzed, breaking the moment. He stood up fast, said he had to take it, and stepped outside. He didn't come back for 15 minutes. When he did, we didn't talk about it. The next night, he brought dinner again, and wine. And we stayed up talking until almost 2 a.m., sprawled on the floor, laughing at the worst Airbnb logos we could find online. "You know," I said, tipsy and too relaxed. "I keep forgetting this started as a way to pay off rent." Jake turned his head toward me, smirking. "Because it doesn't feel like a job anymore?" "Not really." He nodded. "Same." The air between us grew quiet again. Not heavy, just still. Then he said, almost too softly, "I like having you around." I didn't know what to say to that. So I said the truth. "I like being around." He looked at me like he wanted to say something else. Something bigger. But instead, he just handed me the wine bottle and nodded toward my glass. "Top off?" Yeah, I said. Why not? It had been 3 weeks since I started helping Jake with the rental property. 3 weeks of late nights, quiet meals, and long conversations where time slipped away without either of us noticing. We were no longer pretending this was just about rent. I wasn't even tracking how much time I was putting in. I'd stopped counting hours. There was no contract, no clock in or clock out. We just kept showing up for each other. Every evening felt like the beginning of something we weren't ready to name. One Tuesday night, I knocked on his door instead of waiting for his text. That was new. He opened it in that same old hoodie, damp hair curling slightly at his neck. His eyes widened just a little, surprised but not unhappy. "Hey," I said. "I made curry." He leaned against the doorframe, one eyebrow raised. "You cook now?" "I cook when I'm trying to avoid thinking about things," Jake smirked. "What are you avoiding?" I shrugged. "You." He blinked, but he didn't laugh it off. Instead, he stepped back to let me in. "Hope it's spicy." We ate sitting on the floor again, my laptop between us playing some old Anthony Bourdain episode. The food was too hot, and the rice was a little undercooked, but he didn't complain once. After we'd eaten, he sat back, stretched out his legs, and said, "I was thinking about what you said, about how you got into photography." I looked over at him. "Yeah?" He nodded, arms folded behind his head. "The way you talk about it, it's not just about taking pretty pictures. You're always chasing something." That caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, your shots, there's a feeling in them, like you're trying to catch something that doesn't want to be caught." I didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't wrong. I'd never put it that way. But that was exactly it. The light between buildings just before sunset. A stranger's expression in motion. Something that feels real, but barely there. "Maybe I am," I said finally. He nodded, eyes still on the ceiling. "That's why I like having you around." That wasn't the first time he'd said something like that. But this time, the words felt heavier. I sat quietly for a moment, listening to the sound of his slow breathing, the faint hum of my laptop fan, the way the city outside had gone still. Then, without thinking, I asked, "Why are you single?" His eyes shifted to me, like I'd cracked something open. "I'm not good at letting people in," he said after a beat. "I've been in long things, short things. None of them stuck. I think I'm too good at being alone." "But you don't want to be alone," he exhaled through his nose. "Sometimes I do. Sometimes it feels safer." We were both quiet after that. It felt like a thread had been pulled between us, taut and humming. I wanted to touch his hand. I wanted to tell him I knew exactly what he meant. Instead, I packed up my laptop and stood. "I should go," I said, my voice too soft. Jake stood too. "You don't have to." My heart thudded. "Yeah, but maybe I should." We stood there in the kitchen, both of us pretending we weren't standing too close. The clock on the stove read 12:47 a.m. The city was asleep. The air between us was anything but. He looked at me like he was working up the nerve to say something he hadn't said in years. "I don't want this to get weird," he said. "Too late," I replied, with the smallest laugh. His hand brushed my forearm, just a glance of skin. But it was enough. I looked at him. He looked at me. For a second, I really thought he was going to kiss me. But he didn't. Instead, he stepped back, just slightly, a shift of weight, almost nothing. "Night, Evan," he said, and I left. The next few days were awkward in that subtle, quiet way. Like we were both pretending nothing had happened, but everything had. He sent shorter texts. I replied slower. We still met at the duplex to finish up the project. Mock-ups, staging, a few new shots of the courtyard. But the easy rhythm we'd fallen into had gone stiff. Then Saturday came, and I didn't hear from him at all. That night, I found myself staring at my ceiling again, wondering if I'd imagined it all. The glances, the touches, the way he watched me when he thought I wasn't looking. By midnight, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my hoodie and went upstairs. He opened the door half asleep, wearing just sweatpants, rubbing his eyes like he'd just gotten up from the couch. "Hey," I said, "Can I come in?" He stepped aside without a word. I sat on the couch. He sat beside me. Neither of us spoke for a full minute. Then I said, "This is starting to feel like something." Jake's jaw tensed. He nodded. "I'm not crazy, right?" I added. He shook his head. "No." Silence. "But I don't want to screw this up," he said. "This thing we've got," I swallowed. "Then let's not screw it up, but let's stop pretending it's just business." He looked at me, and this time, he didn't hesitate. He kissed me. It wasn't desperate or rushed. It was slow. Measured. Like he was memorizing it. His hand on the side of my face, my fingers brushing the hem of his hoodie. When he pulled back, he didn't say anything. He just rested his forehead against mine. And in that moment, everything shifted. No more deals. No more distance. Just the two of us, finally on the same page. The kiss changed everything. Not in a fireworks and orchestras kind of way, but in the quiet, irreversible way where two people stop pretending, where the air between them finally clears, and all that weight, the wondering, the almosts, falls away. After that night, Jake and I didn't talk much about it. There were no labels, no debrief, no big, "what are we doing?" conversation. We just started moving differently around each other. A little closer, a little softer, less guarded. I still lived downstairs. I still technically owed him rent. But our lives started to overlap in all the quiet places. Some mornings, I'd wake up to a knock at my door and find a coffee waiting on the doormat, still warm. Some nights, I'd be on my way out to grab food and end up eating on Jake's couch instead, plates balanced on our knees, half watching documentaries we never finished. We didn't call it dating. We didn't call it anything. But it felt like everything. One night, about a week after that kiss, we sat on the floor of the duplex again. This time in the finished courtyard, fairy lights strung above us, my laptop propped on a milk crate as we reviewed the final mock-ups for the listing. Jake leaned back, beer in hand, squinting at the screen. "Looks real now," he said. "It is real," I replied. He turned to me. "And you did that." I felt something tighten in my chest. Because no one had ever said it like that before. Not like it mattered. Not like it meant something. I looked down at my hands. Felt good to build something again. "You should do more of it," he said. "Not just when you're trying to pay me off," I laughed. "Think I'm officially paid up, right?" Jake smirked. "I'd say we're even." He looked at me for a moment too long. Not in a tense way, just honest. Like he was letting himself actually see me. Then he said, "You ever think about moving up?" I blinked. "What?" He nodded toward his apartment. "Upstairs. I mean, you're already here half the time." I wasn't expecting that. At all. "You want me to move in?" Jake shrugged. "Maybe. I don't know. You don't have to decide now. Just something to think about." I didn't know what to say. It wasn't that I didn't want to. It was that it felt real. Like a line crossed. Before, I could tell myself this was casual, comfortable, convenient even. But moving in? That was a declaration. And we still hadn't said the thing. The big thing. The one that had been circling us for weeks. "I like this," I said slowly. "Whatever we're doing." Jake nodded. "But I don't want to rush something and mess it up." He nodded again. "Fair." We sat there a while longer, sipping our beers, watching the lights flicker above us. At some point, I leaned back against his shoulder, and he let me. No more words needed. About a week later, I had an interview. A small creative agency across the river had found my portfolio through the Airbnb listing Jake and I had worked on. They were looking for someone to shoot branding material for local businesses. Contract work at first, but steady. I hadn't told Jake about it. Not yet. I didn't want to jinx it. I wore my cleanest jeans, the one button-up shirt I hadn't worn to death, and ran a nervous hand through my hair in the mirror before heading out. The interview went well. Better than I expected. They liked my eye. They liked my tone. They asked if I could start the following Monday. When I got back to the building, Jake was outside, leaning against the gate with a half-eaten granola bar in one hand and his phone in the other. He looked up, and before I could say anything, he said, "You okay?" I nodded, breath still catching up. I got the job. His whole face lit up, not just a polite smile, but something warm and real. Pride, maybe. "You serious? They want me to start Monday." Jake walked over and pulled me into a hug without thinking. Just wrapped his arms around me and held me for a second like it was the most natural thing in the world. And for the first time in months, I felt like things were clicking into place. After everything being broke, feeling like I was failing at everything, scraping by on coffee and hope, I was finally moving forward. Jake pulled back slightly, his hand still resting on my waist. "I'm proud of you," he said, and I knew he meant it. I smiled. "You helped more than you know." He shook his head. "I just gave you the space. You did the rest." And then, as casually as someone might ask what's for dinner, he said it. "I think I'm falling for you." Just like that. No build-up, no theatrics, just the truth. I stared at him, stunned, but not scared. I felt my mouth go dry, my chest buzz with something electric. And I said, "Yeah, me too." We didn't kiss, not right then. He just smiled, took my hand, and walked me upstairs. The first night I stayed over officially, I brought a toothbrush. The second night, I left a pair of socks. By the end of the week, Jake cleared out a drawer. And that was how it started. No dramatic declarations, no moving trucks, just space slowly made for me. In his apartment. In his life. In his quiet, guarded heart. I still lived downstairs, technically. But I didn't sleep there anymore. We weren't rushing, but we weren't holding back either. If you'd told me a couple months ago that I'd end up sort of, dating my landlord, I would have laughed. Or panicked. Or both. But here we were, moving through each other's spaces like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't officially move in, not yet. But most of my stuff was upstairs. Toothbrush. Laptop. My favorite hoodie. My camera bag had its own corner in his closet. And my old apartment? It became more of a technicality than a home. Jake never pressured. He didn't talk about leases or logistics. He just started cooking for two, buying my oat milk, asking me if I'd be around for dinner. Like we'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. It felt easy, almost too easy. Which, of course, meant it couldn't last that way forever. One night in early February, it rained hard. That constant Pacific Northwest downpour that soaked you through no matter how many layers you wore. I'd just come off my first long shoot with the agency. 12 hours in a pop-up market, wrangling clients who didn't understand lighting, holding a camera with numb fingers, then editing on a train with barely enough signal to upload proofs. By the time I got to Jake's place, I was wrecked, soaked through, starving, brain fried. He opened the door and took one look at me and said, "Don't move." He came back with a towel, tossed it over my head, and then kissed my temple before pulling me inside. There was soup on the stove, mushroom and barley, and clean sweats folded neatly on the counter. Mine, from his laundry basket. I don't even remember giving them to him. "Shower," he said, "then eat. Then you can crash and pretend you're not a person until morning." I looked at him, tired but smiling. "You always this bossy?" "Only when you look like a wet ghost." I did what he said, showered, dressed, sat down at the counter with a bowl that smelled like something you could only make if you had actual parental instincts. "You okay?" he asked as I ate. I nodded. Just everything hit me at once. Work, being tired, being happy, I think. Jake leaned on his elbows. "That last one scare you?" I looked up. A little. He didn't say anything, just reached over and tucked a piece of hair behind my ear like it was nothing. "I'm used to things falling apart," I said, quieter now. "When things are good, I start looking for what's going to ruin it." He nodded. "Same." We sat there a while, letting that sit between us. Eventually, he said, "I'm not going anywhere, just so you know." And somehow, I believed him. The first real argument we had wasn't about anything big. It was laundry. I'd accidentally thrown a red hoodie into his whites, turned half his undershirts pink. A rookie mistake, I know. But he snapped. "You've got to be more careful, Evan." "Jesus!" I looked at him, blinking. "It's laundry. It's not about the laundry." That stopped me. He sighed, rubbing his hands over his face. "I like my routines. I need them. I know it's dumb, but I rely on the little things staying where they belong." I realized then just how tightly wound he kept himself. All that control, all that silence. It wasn't just personality. It was armor. "I didn't mean to mess anything up," I said, quieter now. "I know." A long pause. Then he said, "It's hard sometimes, letting someone in." "I know," I echoed. And that was it. No shouting. No dramatic walkouts. Just two people figuring out how to live around each other's soft spots. Things got better after that. We started doing things we hadn't before. Grocery shopping together. Arguing about which pasta shape was superior. He's a penne guy. I'm not proud of that. He started texting me little things during the day. A picture of the rain hitting the upstairs window. A song he thought I'd like. Once, just a photo of my coffee mug next to his on the counter with no caption. I sent him selfies when I was out shooting. Little updates. Our lives wove into each other like threads, slowly and without ceremony. But it wasn't all perfect. One night, I woke up and he wasn't in bed. I found him in the living room, sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. "You okay?" He nodded, but didn't speak for a minute. "My ex left in the middle of the night," he said finally. Didn't say anything, just left the keys and a note. I sat beside him, our knees touching. It's been hard trusting that someone will stay after the lights go off. I didn't say anything, just leaned against him. "I'm not going anywhere," I said quietly, even though I knew he didn't need the promise. He needed the pattern, the proof. The nights I stayed and the mornings I was still there. And so I stayed. Again. And again. We never had a big moment of "I love you." No fireworks. No movie scene. It happened in small ways. When I got sick, he made me soup and didn't complain when I left tissues everywhere. When he had a bad week, I brought home his favorite takeout and let him rant about contractors and building code. And one night, while we were brushing our teeth, side by side at the sink like we'd been doing it for years, I said it. Soft. Simple. "I love you, by the way." He looked at me through the mirror, foam still in his mouth, and spit into the sink before answering. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." No big deal. Except it was. The weird thing about love, real love, is that it doesn't feel like how they tell you it's supposed to. It's not always electric or poetic, or even obvious. Sometimes it just feels like sitting on the couch with someone who knows exactly how you take your coffee, like brushing your teeth side by side in total silence and still feeling connected, like arguing over whether oat milk foam's better than regular milk, and somehow both of you being right. It's boring, maybe, but it's the kind of boring I'd been craving without knowing it. Jake and I found our rhythm slowly, without needing to define anything. We weren't boyfriends in the way other people use that word, at least not out loud. But we'd stopped tiptoeing around the fact that this thing between us had roots now. It wasn't just a passing arrangement. It was real. I still had my lease downstairs, but I hadn't slept in that bed in over a month. One Friday morning, while Jake was at a job site and I was editing photos in his living room, I got a call from my old landlord in my hometown. I let it go to voicemail at first, then listened to it. My mom had slipped on the ice back home, fractured her ankle. She was fine, just needed some help for a week or two while she recovered. When Jake came home that night, I told him I was going to be gone for a while. He didn't say much at first, just nodded and handed me a beer from the fridge like we were still mid-conversation about grocery lists or weekend plans. But later that night, when we were in bed, he said, "I don't like sleeping alone." It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't needy, it was honest. A soft confession in the dark. I shifted closer to him under the blanket. "You won't have to. I'll be back before you even get tired of the silence." He didn't answer right away. Then, "Take your key." I turned to look at him. "I already have a key." "No," he said. "Take your key to this place. Make it official." He reached into the drawer next to his bed and pulled out a spare copy of the front door key. Placed it in my palm. "Don't make me change the locks," he added with a smirk. I leaned in, kissed him slow. "I'm coming back." Back home, things were fine. My mom recovered quickly. I helped her with doctor appointments, made her food that was way too bland for my taste, and tried not to freak out about how slow the days felt. What I didn't expect was how much I missed Jake. Not in a codependent way. Just, I missed the sound of his footsteps on the hardwood, the smell of his coffee, the dumb way he always left one sock on the floor like it was his calling card. We didn't FaceTime much. Neither of us were like that. But he texted me little things. Photos of my camera bag still in the corner. A video of our favorite takeout place's new delivery menu. Once, a shot of the ceiling with the caption, "Too quiet." I came back 10 days later. When I opened the door to his place, the lights were off. I dropped my bag and walked into the kitchen. And there he was, sitting on the counter, eating leftover pasta straight from the container. He looked up. "You said Tuesday." "It's Tuesday." He glanced at the stove clock. "Technically, it's Monday night." I walked over and kissed him before he could say anything else. He kissed me back like he hadn't let himself think about it the whole time I was gone. The next morning, I made coffee while he sat on the couch in his usual spot, one leg curled under him, watching me like he couldn't believe I was real. I looked over and said, "You know I'm not going back downstairs, right?" He smirked. "Took you long enough." I sipped my coffee. "Guess we're roommates now." He laughed. "Roommates who make out. Weirdest Craigslist ad I've ever written." That became our joke. Roommates. We used it anytime things got too serious. Anytime the feelings started to swell up and feel a little too real. But the truth sat underneath all of it. We weren't roommates. Not really. We were building something. And it wasn't about the key, or the meals, or the rent I'd once owed. It was about the way Jake started texting me less about errands, and more just to say, "Thinking of you." The way he started leaving my favorite playlists running on his speakers when he knew I'd be working late. The way his place started to feel more like mine. Not because my stuff was in it, but because I belonged there. One night after a long day of edits, I came home to find Jake in the courtyard of the duplex, the one we'd designed together, just sitting with a beer, looking at the string lights we'd hung months ago. I walked over, sat beside him. "I want to do something with the upstairs unit," he said. "Furnish it, make it a real short-term rental. Think it'll book?" He nodded. "If we shoot it right." I smiled. "You want me to do the photos?" "I want you to do everything, the whole brand." "I'll pay you this time." I looked at him. "You don't have to." "I want to," he said firmly. "You're not a favor. You're the real deal." That hit me harder than it should have. We sat in silence for a while. Then he said, without looking at me, "I still don't know what we call this." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I leaned into him, let our shoulders touch. "Maybe we don't have to call it anything," I said. "Maybe we just keep building it." He nodded, and we did. It had been 6 months since I moved in upstairs, officially or not. Jake never updated the paperwork. I never asked him to. Somewhere along the way, we'd quietly stopped pretending this was temporary, that I was just staying over, that he was just helping me out. The old version of us, the tense tenant and the quiet landlord, felt like someone else's story. Now, we cooked together most nights. My stuff was in every room. The place smelled like my shampoo. He left his hoodies draped over chairs, and I left empty tea mugs everywhere. We were still learning how to exist around each other without stepping on toes. But we were figuring it out. That's the thing about love when it's real. It's not perfect. It's clumsy and quiet and full of little compromises. Jake never liked being touched in the morning before his first coffee. I learned to wait. I liked playing music while I worked. He preferred silence. So we found a playlist we could agree on, mostly instrumental, mostly mellow. He was still Jake, still guarded, still quieter than I'd ever be. But he'd started letting himself be known in other ways. He started writing notes. Not love letters, not anything dramatic. Just small pieces of paper left on the counter or stuck to my laptop. Don't forget to eat today. You looked good in that green shirt. I like waking up next to you. The first time I found one, I just stared at it for a while. It was the simplest sentence scrawled in his half-neat handwriting. I miss you even when you're in the next room. It undid me. One afternoon, I was on a shoot across town when I got a text from him. Can you stop by the duplex after? Need your eye on something. When I got there, I found him in the upstairs unit, the one we'd started staging together for short-term guests. He'd furnished it simply. Clean lines, warm tones, nothing flashy, but it felt intentional. Comfortable. I want you to see it before I list it, he said. Feels weird doing this without you. I looked around, impressed. You didn't do too bad, he smirked. Didn't touch a single font, thought you'd be proud. But then he got quiet, his gaze landing on the corner where the bed sat beneath a tall window. I almost lived here, he said, more to himself than me. I turned toward him. When I bought the building, he went on, this was going to be my place. I had plans. Minimalist life. No distractions. Just space to breathe. I waited. But then I rented it out instead. Moved into the bigger unit. Thought I'd feel more in control up there. I nodded slowly. Do you? He looked at me. I used to. Now I don't care about control as much. That was his way of saying he was letting go. Letting me in. He walked over, leaned against the wall beside me. What would you think about us actually buying a place? One day? My heart skipped, then steadied. You mean like, together? He nodded. Yeah. I wasn't sure if he meant a house, or a new duplex, or just some shared future that neither of us had dared to say out loud until now. But I didn't need all the details. Yeah, I said. One day. He looked at me, and for once, he didn't look like he was bracing for loss. He looked settled. Not bored, not stuck, just settled. A few weeks later, we hosted our first guest upstairs, a traveling writer who left us a glowing review and forgot a scarf in the closet. We framed the review and hung it in the stairwell. The scarf stayed in a drawer we labeled Lost and Found, even though I think Jake secretly liked how it looked there. Things didn't go back to how they were before. They kept going forward. We got into dumb arguments about grocery lists. Jake got a dog, something small and scruffy that liked me more than it liked him. I started teaching a weekend photo class at the community center. Jake finally let someone else manage the books for his property so he could sleep better at night. We didn't talk about forever all the time, but we acted like we believed in it. One night, as we were brushing our teeth, I looked at him in the mirror. You know, I said, this whole thing started because I couldn't pay rent, Jake smirked. Best unpaid invoice of my life. I spit out my toothpaste. You're such a dork, he grinned. You love it. I did, and I always would.